On the frozen tundra of Siberia some 50,000 years ago, a woolly mammoth met its end under mysterious circumstances. In samples of the animal's skin, researchers have now discovered chromosomes preserved in their original 3D configuration, a feat previously thought impossible in ancient DNA research. The team also revealed the spatial organization of the mammoth's DNA molecules and the active genes in its skin, including one responsible for giving the animal its fuzzy appearance.
Hey everybody, welcome to Studio 64. My name's David. I've been searching the interzones for some more science, space and tech news to share with you. And I found this over at Science Alert. Yes, scientists reconstruct mammoth chromosomes in 3D in amazing first. This should be interesting. Yes, a fragment of skin trapped in permafrost for 52,000 years has just given us a marvellous world first. Yes, left by a woolly mammoth, Mammuthus primigenius. The material is delivered unto us not just a genome, but a three-dimensional reconstruction of the once magnificent animal's chromosomes. Yes, this is a new type of fossil, and its scale dwarfs that of individual ancient DNA fragments. 1,000,000 times more sequence, says geneticist Erez Lieberman-Aden of Baylor College of Medicine in the US. Now, as usual, I'll leave the link to the main article below the video, so you can pop in, check out these embedded links, go for a bit of a deeper dive if you want beyond the main article. Makes a very interesting read, believe me. Yes, it is also the first time a karyotype of any sort has been determined for an ancient sample. Now, the last woolly mammoth died off around 4,000 years ago, leaving scientists to piece together their history and their lives through the traces that they left behind. 4,000 years, that's not really that long ago, is it? In the history of the world, that's actually quite interesting. Because they are adapted to cold environments, many of their remains have fortunately been found in frozen places that serve as natural freezers, preserving more of their genetic material than might have been found otherwise. This is interesting, very interesting indeed. Preserved mammoth foot recovered from a permafrost environment. Wow, okay. That's really well preserved, isn't it? Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Gotta love this stuff. As I say, I'm not a scientist myself, just love all science and sharing it with people. I just think it's fantastic. In 2018, the Siberian tundra yielded remains of a female woolly mammoth that were exceptionally well preserved. The specimen included not just bones, but skin tissue that a team of researchers thought might have preserved more of the beast's genetic material than anyone had previously reconverted. Very interesting. Well, here's a little video, a short video here on the woolly mammoth and how groups survived for centuries. This should be very interesting. Let's take a little look at it. Looks very interesting indeed.
10,000 years ago, as sea levels rose, it trapped a small group of woolly mammoths on an island in the Arctic. And scientists now say that group of woolly mammoths lived for thousands of years longer. And there's a new theory about why they're extinct. You and I love this one. Hey.
This is a fantastic story, okay? And I know that we did elephants last week, so we're going to do woolly mammoths. By the way, Russell, did you know that the DNA shared by the Asian elephant and the woolly mammoth is like 99.6%?
Really?
So like 0.4% is the difference. Anyway, that's not what the story is about. So, you know, at first, of course, the woolly mammoth across North America, from Canada down into the United States, of course, they weren't that named back then, but I'm talking about the land areas. And all of a sudden, they started to dwindle. And the problem was hunters and habitat loss. As things started to warm up and the ice started to melt, they started to lose some of their territory. And then, of course, the hunters came in and started taking care of them as well. So they thought they were extinct. But what happened was there were mammoths that were stuck on this little island there. You see it? You see Russia, you see the United States. That's actually Alaska, by the way. And northwest of Alaska, there's Wrangel Island. So when the ice started to melt, they got stuck on this island. And at one point, there was only 8 woolly mammoths. 8 woolly mammoths. And of course, they're stuck on the island by themselves. So they started to procreate. And eventually they managed to get over 300 woolly mammoths. But the problem with that, Russell, and if you think about this, they're only breeding amongst themselves.
Yeah.
The same DNA. So inbreeding could become obviously a huge problem. And even though this is a relatively large island as well, it is the same DNA just being reproduced over and over and over again. So this is what scientists started to realize, because what they did was they took 21 mammoths, obviously the remains, 14 from Wrangel Island, 7 from the mainland, and they covered 50,000 years of mammoth history. So that's a long stretch of woolly mammoth history. And they started to realize that it wasn't the inbreeding that got them, Russell, because they managed to go on for several thousand years at a slow clip just like this. And what they did was they changed their behavior to avoid inbreeding. So they would almost find distant relatives of themselves to continue to breed with rather than somebody close to them. They figured this out on their own. So then they said, well, they were able to go thousands of more years, and then all of a sudden they were gone. So scientists and researchers, geneticists have come up with a conclusion. It was not the lack of genetic diversity that killed the woolly mammoths. It was an instantaneous event, and they think what it possibly could have been was something like a bird flu or some type of flu, because if one of the mammoths got it, remember, their genetic diversity really wasn't that great, wasn't variable. So if one of them got that, they would all get that. So they're thinking likely it was some type of a disease that took them all out at once, or of course an asteroid or a meteor hit or something. But this is 4,000 years ago. What was happening 4,000 years ago? The pyramids were being built.
This is how recent this was.
So woolly mammoths were on the earth while the pyramids were being built.
Wow.
Kind of cool. Now they're gone, though, unfortunately.
That was fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very, very interesting, wasn't it? Yeah, like it's interesting to see that, you know, it wasn't their inbreeding that caused them. It was a singular event. That's absolutely amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? Because they were so isolated on the island, they never had anywhere to run, did they? Yeah. That's because the mammoth appears to have been freeze-dried shortly after it died, this particular little mammoth up here. Yes. A process that improves preservation by removing moisture by way of sublimation while freezing what remains. This mummification process preserves the material in a glass-like state, brittle but relatively intact, like a piece of woolly mammoth jerky. Wonder if we get some biltong mammoth. Yes, that'll be interesting. We've known that tiny fragments of ancient DNA can survive for long periods of time, says genomicist Marcela Sandoval Velasco. Magnificent name, by the way, there, Marcela. Marcela Sandoval Velasco. You've got to say it like that, too. The University of Copenhagen and co-lead author of the study. But what we found here is a sample where the three-dimensional arrangements of these DNA fragments was frozen in place for tens of millennia, thereby preserving the structure of the whole chromosome. Interesting indeed. Yeah, very interesting. What's this say? A diagram illustrating the preservation of the mammoth. There we go. So he gets frozen. He ends up getting frozen. That's interesting. Gets preserved. Wow. As I say, I'm not a scientist, not a geneticist. I just love all this stuff. Fascinating. Loops. Compartments and chromosome. Yeah. So snap freezing them preserves preserves everything. That's really interesting. I suppose the same with anything, really. But that's just, that's intensely fascinating. That matters because it gives us way more genetic information than just the piecemeal scraps we've recovered previously. Yeah, so, more chunks of the mammoth get frozen. Yeah. The entire genome of an organism is a sequence of billions of nucleotide bases that pair up to form a number of long, twisted polymers of double-stranded DNA. These thread-like molecules wind back on themselves to form structures called chromosomes, allowing the genome to fit neatly inside the nucleus of a cell while protecting its more delicate sequences and facilitating expression. Now, each chromosome can contain hundreds of millions of base pairs, though even in well-preserved remains, chromosomes quickly break down into pieces rarely much longer than around 100 base pairs. Now, the researchers took a piece of skin from behind the mammoth's ear and used an analysis technique called Hi-C to help them figure out which parts of the puzzle go where. It was painstaking work that took several years, but eventually the team was able to map the mammoth's DNA, giving access to a whole range of new insights. That would be very interesting indeed. Yeah, and as the guy said in that video, was it the Indian elephant and the mammoth share, 98% or 99% DNA or something? That's quite interesting. Similar to humans and chimpanzees, I guess, though a lot of us are more closely related to chimpanzees than others. Fascinating. Firstly, they were able to determine that the woolly mammoth had 28 pairs of chromosomes, the first time we've been able to count them in an animal that died out so very long ago. The number makes sense because the mammoth's closest living relatives, elephants, also have 28 pairs. Now, by comparing ancient DNA molecules to the DNA sequences of modern species, it's possible to find cases where single letters of the genetic code have changed, says geneticist and co-lead author Olga Dunchenko of Baylor College of Medicine and Rice University. Yes, fossil chromosomes are a game changer because knowing the shape of an organism's chromosomes makes it possible to assemble the entire DNA sequence of extinct creatures. This enables the types of insights that would not have been possible before. This is interesting. The primary sample from which the mammoth chromosomes were obtained. Okay. That's so cool, this stuff. This is amazing. As I say, I really find it interesting because if we can do this with mammoths, imagine what else we could find frozen in places like Antarctica or, somewhere like that. Could definitely get some interesting DNA samples from there, that's for sure. Yes, this is because active and inactive genes tend to be spatially separated into different regions of the cell nucleus, a phenomenon known as chromosome compartmentalization. I can't even speak today. My brain's operating on half a Biden. Chromosome compartmentalization. By comparing compartmentalization. There I go again.
Oh, bitch, use your words.
Oh dear. Compartmentalization in mammoths and elephants. The researchers hope to figure out why they are so similar, but also so different. So the obvious question for us is, why is it a woolly mammoth? Why isn't it a shockingly bald mammoth? Says geneticist Thomas Gilbert of the University of Copenhagen. The fact that, I'm assuming this is because they adapted to cold temperatures, I would suspect. That was part of their adaptation. The fact that the compartmentalization was still preserved in these fossils was critical because it made it possible to look for the very first time at which genes were active in a woolly mammoth. And it turns out that there are key genes that regulate hair follicle development whose activity pattern is totally different than in elephants. This opens up a whole new world of study into the lives and eventual demise of the woolly mammoth. Although the preservation of the specimen is rare, even one set of chromosomes expands our knowledge into a new sphere. And the team's analysis could be used to develop methodologies for even more degraded samples. They recommend testing it on a range of samples from different environments to see what kind of results might be just out there waiting to be discovered. And again, as I said, it could be applied to other creatures as well. Yeah. I'm assuming the technique could be modified to do that. Ancient Egyptian priests believed that mummification prepared a person or animal to be reanimated in a future life. They write in their paper. They may have been closer to the mark than has been realised. Yes, the findings have been published in Cell, and as I say, link to the main article below the video. Definitely pop in and check out some of these embedded links. It's very, very interesting indeed. Well, isn't that absolutely amazing? Yes, the DNA extracted from a fossilised woolly mammoth. Absolutely incredible. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Love to hear from you. Could it be modified, this technique, to work with other creatures that, we end up finding that have been frozen somewhere? Fascinating. All right, well, my name is David. Thanks for joining me for another Studio 64 Science, Space and Tech News update. I shall see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're up for it, drop a comment down below the video because I'd love to hear what you think. All right, take care. And as I always say, if you can't be good at it. And as I also always say,
I'll be back.